We do have 5 o'clock, but we're expecting a few more people, so let's hang out for a minute before we get started. All right, I do have 5:01 and I do see a quorum of members present, so I will go ahead and get started and hopefully the others will join in. Megan, I think we have a couple of people who should be joining us, so keep an eye out. And so good afternoon. This open meeting of the Nantucket Planning and Economic Development Commission is convened by video conference pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021 as extended on July 16th, 2022. This open session for February 23rd is beginning at 5:01 p.m. This meeting is being recorded and all attendees are participating remotely via Zoom as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Anything you broadcast may be captured by the recording. Please silence all phones and devices. Members of the public wishing to participate in the meeting must use their full name for Zoom access. If full names are not used, people will not be allowed to participate in the discussion. The town reserves the right to remove any member of the public from the meeting who doesn't use their full name or who acts inappropriately. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For items with public comment, after members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment to those members of the public that have joined the meeting via Zoom. Members of the public who wish to speak must state their names and be acknowledged by and speak through the chair. If you're not able to participate in the remote meeting, you may also submit comments via email to Megan Trudell at mtrudell@nantucket-ma.gov to be read into the meeting record or otherwise responded to. I am Mary Longacre, Chair of the NPNEDC. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Seth Engelborg?
Here.
All right, I don't see Don Holgate at the moment. Christy, I don't see Christy Parentella. Wendy Hudson?
Here.
Dawn's having trouble getting in, she said.
Thank you, Nat. Megan, maybe you can send her a new invitation. I don't see Bert Johnson, Nat Lowell. We just heard
Here.
from. Barry Rector.
Here.
Joe Topham.
Here.
John Trudell is not able to join us today, and Mary Longacre. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative.
I'm here too, Mary.
Oh, Dave, I'm sorry, I skipped you.
That's all right.
Good to see you. Is Andrew back in, Megan? I don't see him.
I'm not seeing him.
I'm sure he'll be joining us. Thank you for saying hello, Megan, and also Leslie Snell.
Here.
And from the Mass DOT, we have Raisa Kwame.
Here.
Good to see you again. Anticipated speakers on the agenda, please respond in the affirmative. Jesse Bell from the Nantucket Land Bank.
Here.
And I see we also have Jack Moran from Mass DOT. Jack, are you presenting today?
I am indeed for PM2 performance measures.
Thank you for joining us. I believe it's everyone. So the first item would be for approval of the agenda, and we may have, do we have any adjustments on the agenda, Megan? We're removing the minutes of December 19. Those are not yet available. Anything else? No, okay. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All right, I'll take the second from Nat. Roll call vote, Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Wendy Hudson,
Aye.
Dave Iverson,
Aye.
Nat Lowell,
Aye.
Barry Rector,
Aye.
Joe Topham,
Aye.
and Mary Longacre, aye. So we have public comment available. Are there any members of the public present who wish to offer a comment at this time? Any hands up, Megan?
I'm seeing none.
Okay. If there is no public comment, we'll move on to approval of the minutes from January 23rd. These were distributed to members. I did note that there's a section with a number of typos, which was the presentation from Chantal Boyce Murphy. With the commission's indulgence, we can fix those typos after the approval so that we can take care of the minutes today. If no one has an objection, are there any other questions or comments on the minutes? We'll take a motion to approve.
So moved.
Thank you, Seth. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Barry. Roll call vote, Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Wendy Hudson,
Aye.
Dave Iverson,
Aye.
Matt Lowell,
Aye.
Barry Rector,
Aye.
Joe Topham,
I wasn't present, so I'm recusing.
and Mary Longacre, aye. Thank you, Joe. Next item on the agenda is a presentation from Jesse Bell, Executive Director of the Nantucket Land Bank. Barry, thank you for inviting Jesse to join us today. Do you want to introduce her any further?
No, I think that's sufficient at this point, but I will just say very quickly, I really appreciate Jesse coming out. Sometimes having the different executive directors show up, we think we know a lot about the organization, but there are times when, you know, they're going to bring some things forward. We're like, oh my God, wow, isn't that really awesome? This also gives us an opportunity to begin to dialogue with them a little bit about, you know, where we see mutual areas where we can work together in the sense of us being a regional planning agency. So without further ado, thank you, Jesse, so much. I really appreciate this. So through you, Madam Chair, we're good to go.
Thank you, Barry. Jesse, welcome.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here. And thank you, Barry, for the invitation. Can I share my screen?
Megan?
Can everybody see the pretty land bank stump pond picture?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I thought I would go through a little bit of the history of the land bank, which I'm sure some of you may know, and then highlight three of the projects in the downtown that are on the water that we're currently in planning. And then at the end, just talk about some partnership and collaboration opportunities that I see. And I look forward to hearing, you know, any suggestions that you have. So history of the land bank. We have this in our press archives, and I just thought it was interesting because, you know, we always say our mission is conservation, recreation, and agriculture for the benefit of the public in perpetuity. And that's a little bit of a summary of what the act says. But in this old article from 1983, when the land bank, the home rule petition was on the annual town meeting warrant, there's this little paragraph that says there are two aspects of the land bank that are different from and go beyond existing institutions. One is its origin. It began with the Planning Commission's draft proposal for goals and objectives for balanced growth, in which a goal A was to quote unquote, establish an island-wide open space system by expanding and linking up existing public and cooperating private conservation and recreation lands. Please note, an island-wide system. We've never had that before, just a hodgepodge of separate land parcels. The land bank would be oriented to pull things together and make some sense out of the present patchwork. So I find it interesting that I'm here in front of the Planning Commission, which was, you know, instrumental in creating the land bank, along with, of course, our founding father, Bill Klein, who was the planning director at the time. I thought that was interesting. And so I will say also, sort of on top of conservation, recreation, and agriculture, there's a real emphasis on public access, and in particular, public access to the water, us being a publicly funded organization. I was also going to actually, just before I move on, so just to touch on, when the Land Bank Act was passed in 1983, the stars were really aligned. You know, you had 2 state senators and 1 state rep that had strong ties to Nantucket, and you also had Governor Dukakis that was married on Nantucket. So it was passed. There's 1 dissenting vote at annual town meeting in 1983, and it was actually signed into law by Governor Dukakis at the end of 1983. And it's amazing, actually, because I don't think things get signed into law that swiftly these days. But Martha's Vineyard quickly followed suit. The one distinction between the Nantucket Land Bank and the Martha's Vineyard Land Bank is there are some other distinctions, but in terms of our purposes is that the Martha's Vineyard Land Bank can only do passive recreation. They can't do active recreation. So we own golf courses, playgrounds, the bike park that, was recently in the press that we're planning. So all of that, the Martha's Vineyard Land Bank would not pursue those things. It also, so subsequently after Martha's Vineyard, created a land bank, there was a bunch of interest in the land bank model. A lot of other special interests, as I understand it, started cropping up around the state. There were dozens of land bank proposals coming up. And basically that gave rise to the Community Preservation Act, which was ultimately passed in 1997. And we were one of the earliest communities to adopt this Community Preservation Act. And so we've had the benefit of having both, which is, I think, really great for Nantucket. So moving on to our projects highlights. This is, so about exactly a year ago today, we purchased 19 East Creek Road, which is this property. It's 1 acre parcel in front of our island home on the creeks. We also own this parcel right here, 16 East Creek. And it currently contains a private dwelling and dock, which extends out into the marsh. We've been using Scape Landscape Architects to transform this residential property into an inclusive waterfront park that builds resiliency by restoring and enhancing native coastal habitats. So the existing dwelling will be replaced with a deck overlooking the marsh. Elevated boardwalk paths will connect to the deck and refurbished dock. And there's going to be a direct access connection to our island home or the future of the Salt Marsh Center if that ends up coming to fruition. And I wanted to thank the town publicly here for the license area that they granted to us to connect the 16 East Creek with 19 East Creek, and also a license area to continue with permitting and construction of this, which on the town meeting warrant for this year is actually that we've asked for a permanent easement because we'll forever, continue to maintain that easement area and that connection. So that is that project. And this landscape architects are phenomenal, and they have been superimposing these designs into Nantucket landscape. So this is sort of the view from the water. And this is sort of from the boardwalk headed towards the viewing deck area. And then we made a conscious decision to not have any plantings in the deck. And just because we felt like this is really going to be an immersive experience out on the water. And we felt like the natural vegetation of the marsh was enough of an attraction, shall we say. So that is that project. And it also, I think, from a resiliency perspective, what this allows is it allows marsh migration over time. So the boardwalk is elevated on piles, and the marsh can continue to move inland over time. More pictures. Okay, Consu Springs. So historically, Consu was a large contiguous marsh, but a berm was added for the railway right here, which basically bisected the marsh that we see today. Goose Pond and surrounding marsh receive and hold stormwater from the surrounding watershed, which then filters into the harbor. The pond is currently compromised by excess nutrients and sediment buildup that causes algal blooms. Our plans are to enhance the public experience of the property with improved bike and pedestrian access and circulation throughout, and a direct connection to Nantucket Harbor. One of the other things on the town meeting warrant is this, thanks to Andrew, is this parcel here, which will connect all of this to the beach. So we are also, as you know, I think we've done 2 years of eradicating the Phragmites treatment. And so that will continue. So the goals long-term are to reduce the Phragmites cover to increase native species diversity within the marsh, dredging excess sediment and nutrients that have built up in Goose Pond, and we're also exploring how to improve tidal exchange through this existing culvert. So in addition to enhancing the public experience, we're looking for opportunities to incorporate resiliency in this design, specifically exploring the role of the berm and culvert in reducing flooding to the surrounding upland areas. Given expected future impacts of climate change, we're looking to improve and maintain the health of the marsh system, as salt marshes can act like sponges in that they have enormous capacity for flood storage and carbon sequestration, making them key green infrastructure components of resilient coastlines. And this project is a little bit behind, so this is a little further behind in planning than the other two I'm presenting, but this is where we're at right now with this one. And this kind of applies to all of these projects. This one in particular, the whole point is that there's an intense permitting roadmap that goes along with these projects, complex, and so just to kind of give you a snapshot of what that looks like. Washington and Francis Street. Given the significant public ownership on Washington Street, town and land bank combined, we've been working in collaboration with the town and Remain on a long-term conceptual framework for the entire Washington Street corridor. The street, as we all know, is one of the island's main transportation arteries and exists as the only real stretch of beach in the core downtown other than Children's Beach. We began exploring coastal resiliency design opportunities along the entire stretch with SCAPE and the Woods Hole Group in 2021. And while much of Washington Street experiences flooding during storms, this corner of Washington and Francis Streets represents not only a flood pathway from the water side, but also a stormwater retention area during precipitation events. The first phase of implementation in the broader framework plan has become the area we are now focused on right here on this corner. This phase will include a beachfront viewing deck, stormwater gardens, and a permeable parking area. We were asked to keep the program of the kayak rental here on the town's parcel, as well as the message was that we needed to keep this parking. So we kept both of those uses there. And then let's see. So flooding in this parcel already experiences flooding. And it will be exacerbated over time by sea level rise and increased precipitation events. The main goal of this project is to introduce the concept of combining hard engineering with green infrastructure to reach elevation 8, which will restrict high tide flooding through 2070 with predicted sea level rise. So basically what you're seeing here, this white dotted line, is basically an elevated berm that will continue, or in the framework plan down Washington Street, there is an element of hard structure in that berm, of course, with enhanced coastal vegetation. All of this is accessible, complies with ADA, and so the engineers have been calling this back elevated berm the last line of defense. So that's what will protect it ultimately. And then I just actually learned this. The elevation 8 actually doesn't mean 8 feet in the air. It means that from the ground when you're standing there, it's 4 feet, actually. So this is that site today. And this is that site with this project superimposed on it. And so moving on, I guess just to highlight, we're doing a lot, but just to kind of rattle through a few more things. I think, it was widely publicized the award of Fogtown Farm at Eat Fire Spring. We're about to issue another request for responses at Mount Vernon Farm for agricultural use of some plots there. We have a community garden survey out at the moment, and that we're interested to see what neighborhoods would like to have community gardens, as an amenity in their neighborhoods. We have an RFQ out right now for a bike park design. We have a few properties we've acquired in the last few years that have existing docks, but that will require planning and permitting to convert them to public use docks. So that needs to get started. In terms of beach access, it's always a constant priority. And we have been, we built several stairs in the last few years and just bought a whole bunch of adjustable stairs. And our permitting, for example, last night, the town just approved the Magnolia Ave road that goes to the beach in Sconset. We intend to acquire that and working with the Sconset Trust to rebuild those public beach stairs, which are the only public beach stairs on south of the bridge in Sconset. Cisco parking lot needs to be permitted to go to get moved back because of erosion. We are in the process of permitting that. We also have Lily Pond, an ecological restoration is in the works there. Planning is in planning. Easton Street Park, that's another park that will be fully accessible and also is aiming to try to resolve some of the flooding issues in that area. Maya Comet Pond dredging, we recently agreed to partner with the town on the design and engineering, the top ranked proposal for that project, for the engineering and design work for that project. And presumably we will continue that partnership down the road when it comes time to construct. Trail connectivity, we are always looking to connect and, connect existing trails and make it easier to traverse the island, with alternative modes of transportation and walking and biking and all of that. Accessibility, I would say, is at the forefront of every new project we're planning. And I couldn't list everything, so I just said, and so much more. And as far as opportunities for partnership and collaboration, I just wanted to make everyone aware that since I have become director, that we have new land bank representation on the Community Preservation Committee. We felt like we wanted to have a direct representation, so we have a staff member on that committee now. We have a staff member on the Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee. And I just recently joined the Municipal Harbor Plan Update Committee. So I feel like we're starting to infiltrate a little bit more than we have historically into sort of town planning. And so I guess I'm still on the learning curve with the NEDC. So I don't know if I understand everything that you guys do. I communicate with Andrew frequently. But just to sort of, I guess it would be, I want you to be aware of land bank projects because as you review island planning documents for consistency and completeness, I think given the uphill battles, I think we're going to be facing, and the town is going to be facing, I think, with, some of these coastal projects and climate change impacts, that it would be great to sort of be in sync and make sure that some of these concepts are included in those planning documents, because I think, change starts at the local level, and definitely in permitting applications, if we can reference, a handful of local plans that support a project, that's really helpful. And so in the future, and then NP and EDC open space and recreation plan, in the future update of that, we would love to be part of that. I think Eric was part of it, and then there was COVID, and so it was a long time getting that done. But love to be involved in the next iteration, and more importantly, perhaps in the near term, having our name somewhere on this would be great, because again, even though we're not a municipality, I think sometimes they ask for this, and it's good to be able to say that our name is on there somewhere. And so let's see, I think working collaboratively on grant applications would be great. My understanding is that the state favors that. They like to see that. On a place like, Washington Street, that to me is just an obvious one. Land Bank in town could, do something collaboratively for Washington Street and for grant funding. And then I'm open to any ideas, comments, or questions that you have. I don't know how long that was. I was told like I had 10, 15 minutes and I didn't time myself. So
that was great, Jesse. To Barry's point, I learned something about the land bank, so I appreciate that. And thank you for coming today. I see that Don Holgate has a question.
Oh, hey, Jesse. That was a really great presentation. I've seen the boardwalk in front of the island home, which I'm really excited about. Hopefully the permitting goes well. But I had one question about the plan on Washington and Francis.
mm-hmm.
I was just a little bit surprised about what was slated at Salt Marsh. I'm wondering who those conversations were with.
So I talked with Libby and Vince, and I have been inviting Andrew and some planning staff to the meetings. I know it's hard to get, everyone's really busy. But I was just told, again, that's kind of a parcel that we're just sort of ushering and shepherding for the town in this planning,
Okay.
and we were told to keep the existing, we were told that you needed the parking. And so we were keeping the parking, and then that the kayak use you wanted to continue that.
Okay. Okay. That,
I-
that answers my question, because we have talked about it as a necessity for our transportation network. So
Mhm.
really the water garden is where the building is right now, right?
Yep, and so how
Right.
that actually works is really interesting. So there's a tide gate underneath the road. So basically, these stormwater wetlands fill up, and at high tide, the gate is closed. And then as the tide recedes, the stormwater wetlands percolate down and drain out under the road. So it's pretty interesting.
Thank you.
Andrew, did you want to respond to that specific question? I do have some hands from commissioners up.
I had a separate comment entirely.
Okay, so let's continue with commissioners. Barry, I saw you waving, and then we'll go to Seth.
Yeah, no, let's go to Seth first, please.
Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Jesse, for your presentation. I'm pretty familiar with most of these projects already, but I'd just like to say that a few meetings ago, we talked about potentially moving forward with pursuing a climate action plan as a goal of this commission. And I know that there has been some actions taken on the town's behalf in support of that objective. Having recently hired a sustainability program manager, Vince Murphy, to assist with that. So I'd request that we move forward with that climate action plan. And I see a huge area of overlap and collaboration between the NP and EDC and the land bank, particularly in light of what they're doing or attempting to do in terms of downtown resiliency. So I'd request that we consider them a key partner in this planning phase. And I know permitting is always tricky. I know all these things will have to come through the Conservation Commission, and I'll see them there. But I think in terms of climate action planning, there's a lot of benefit in mutual collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. I think anything downtown is going to require a tremendous amount of collaboration, no matter what we try to do. We being the town. Barry, do you want to follow up with your comment?
Yeah, just a few things. Thank you, Jesse, again, so much. A few things I didn't know that were going on was the plans for the salt marsh area and stuff. I was president of that board for several years, and we saw that that property had a lot more intrinsic value than what was there right now. So to see something begin to move on that process is delightful. There are better places for the salt marsh to be, and this, I think, just keys in very nicely with some of the future potentials of what could happen there. You had talked about collaborative efforts. The other thing I'm going to probably strongly encourage you to do is, if you don't know Mike Burns, do get to know him, because bike paths are front and center of one of the things that the NP and EDC does with the transportation planners. So there is plenty of time and plenty of projects that may become available where we could mutually cooperate with each other to try to extend that system. So once he kind of settles in for a little bit, I'd strongly encourage, get together with him and pick his brain a little bit, and you can probably see where there's some things that can begin to happen. So before anyone else gets you at this point, I really appreciate you showing up. Like I said, every time we've learned something a little bit new about something that we thought we had a handle on at this point. So thanks for showing us some things we didn't know. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Barry. Dave, did you have a comment too? No, okay. Any other comments from commissioners before we go to Andrew? Okay, Andrew, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to thank you, Jesse. It's been very rewarding to have a colleague that I can work with, and we can really, I think, put our heads together on a lot of these issues. A lot of our work, especially real estate wise, is overlapping, and I think you're right, and I'm happy to see a real effort move forward to work on the connections and work on the overall management. I think that's where now is the time, after all of this effort to acquire, parcels all over, to knit them together and to sort of work on those connections. As you know, I send you examples all across the country where I go to give you some ideas or inspiration, and I look forward to that. So I really want to just say thank you for working together with us.
And thank you for your support. You've been a great resource for me stepping into the position.
Great. Well, Jesse, I'm sure we'll hear from you again at some point in the future and look forward to working with you on plans for wonderful things for Nantucket.
Great. All right.
All right, the next item on our agenda is the update from the Mass Department of Transportation, beginning, I guess, with Jack Moran on the PM1, PM2, and PM3 performance measures.
Good evening, Madam Chair. Thank you, and happy to be here with you. Yeah, I will be starting on the performance management too, if that's fine. And I think my colleague will be continuing with the other two, but it's a little bit out of order, but happy to jump right in. And if it's okay, I'd like to share a quick presentation.
Yes, please. And my apologies, Raisa. I didn't realize you were tag teaming on this.
Not at all. And it looks like that worked.
Yep, you can see your agenda.
Okay. So a little bit of background here just on my area of focus. This set of targets that we're talking about is condition only. So as opposed to some of the other measures like congestion, safety, my job is I think comparatively easier in probably the nuts and bolts that go into the measures themselves, but also then the forecasting. So just real quick, there'll be 4 points I'll try to get across here, just a background on the measures themselves. And we are entering now the second full performance period of this federal performance management rollout. So we'll look a little bit at how we did the first go around, and then talk a little bit about the targets themselves for pavement and bridge. And then one key point here is that these measures are for the national highway system. And there are no national highway system facilities on the island of Nantucket. I just realized that earlier this week, but as I understand it, the regulations are such that the state DOTs, so us, in this case, MassDOT, identify targets for statewide usage, and then the MPOs, the regions, the planning commissions, then either opt to adopt the targets or identify their own. So I'm not sure if they ever envisioned a situation like this, but here we are. And obviously, I think the support of every citizen in the Commonwealth is important with these targets. So all that being said, a little bit about the NHS, if any of this is new, which I doubt it is. It's a subset of our public roads, and it first identified in 1995. That was the Clinton administration, I believe. And the roads themselves are the entirety of the interstate system. And then there was a process to identify other major facilities, primarily arterials, that serve airports, military bases, intermodal terminals, various other transportation hubs such as rail and truck terminals, and ultimately just strategic transport facilities. In Massachusetts, we MassDOT own the entirety of the national highway system in the case of interstates, and then the non-interstate national highway system is approximately split up, well, 2/3 MassDOT, 1/3 with the region municipality. So I have a little bit about where those roads are in a minute. So as far as what sort of infrastructure are we measuring, at this moment, we are focused exclusively on pavement and bridge in the federal performance measurement system. At the DOT, we look at other things as well. Obviously, we have a whole host of assets that are part of our transportation network: tunnels, lighting, traffic signals, pedestrian accommodations, bicycle accommodations, all these things we measure internally as well. But certainly pavement and bridge from a budgetary standpoint command the lion's share of our investment due to their scale. And the measures themselves basically go as a top level measure, a bottom level measure. That's both for pavement and bridge. So we measure the percent good of pavement, percent poor of pavement. And similarly on the bridge side, percent good bridges, percent poor bridges. Pavement is measured using a federal indices, much like most communities maintain or engage with a consultant to develop it. It's a measure that looks at various forms of distress in the pavement. Pavement distresses in many ways, most notably through cracking, but we look at the ride quality itself, and then we look at rutting, and we look at raveling, and these are all just different forms of way a pavement material can deteriorate. That gets compiled into a single measure, and then the indices itself maps to these other categories of good, fair, and poor. I think that pretty much describes the pavement side. On the bridge side, the key factor here that was introduced with the federal performance measurement system is the integration of the bridge size. For a long time, we had measured the number of bridges in a particular condition state. And I guess most notably, when we embarked upon the accelerated bridge program about 10 years ago, there were targets set to maintain or get below a certain number of poor bridges. And we were successful in that. And it was basically a number that we could easily identify and track our progress towards. But it was just a number of bridges, the count of bridges. But in reality, the size of the bridge is really an important factor to consider, both in performance management and budget planning. We have about 29 million square feet of National Highway System bridges in Massachusetts. The average bridge size is about 14,000 square feet, but there are structures in the inventory well in excess of 100 and even above 200,000 square feet. So the size factor basically allows us to take into account that outsized impact that a large structure would have on performance. And then as a result, we can take that into account in our budget planning, et cetera. On this next slide, we will, as promised, looked at how we did with the first full performance period, which was based on data from calendar year 2019 and calendar year 2021. So essentially, we set a 2-year, in 2018, we set a 2-year target. It was considered a 2-year target because it was 19 condition data, but the target was for basically 2020, and then similarly a target for 2022. There was a bit of phased implementation here, and that was to basically recognize that, at least for the case of pavement, there was a sophistication involved in the data that the federal government was asking us to collect. And not all DOTs had purchased that equipment or were using it regularly or were in a place to provide it. We effectively have to provide the data both for bridge and pavement on an annual basis. So there's a little bit of a transition period there. And the color coding here is just meant to indicate how we did with our target setting. Did we achieve it? Did we surpass it? And you can see in the 2019 actuals, we did okay. As you can, the numbers themselves aren't far off, but for the purposes of this exercise, it's actually within 0.1% that is seen as achieving the target. So there's not much margin of error here. Moving on to 21, quite a bit better. And I'll just call your attention to the target for poor condition bridges on the National Highway System, where, effectively we're talking the difference of 3 bridges. So it's not a big difference, but certainly we make every effort to try to achieve these, as close as is possible. I'll move on now just to give you guys an idea on kind of the asset inventories as they relate across the state. So interstate's entirely owned by MassDOT. You can see there's a good amount of it within the Boston region, but certainly the interstate system extends well out into Western Mass, the I-90 being first and foremost there, and then north-south facilities as well. Non-interstates, this chart's a little different because there is that shared ownership, and that does vary widely. In some cases, it's entirely entirely state-owned or majority state-owned, and as you can see with the Boston region, it's actually majority owned by municipalities. So just onto the targets here. We are presenting before you now what our future 2- and 4-year targets are for this second full performance period. Again, each target set will have a high-end target and a low-end target. We're starting with the base of 72% good on the interstates, and we're essentially forecasting a bit of a conservative target for 23 and 25. 2 reasons for that on the good side. Number one being that we did recognize a slight drop in interstate condition over the course of the previous performance period. So we, in fact, building that into our targets, that could be a trend that we need to watch out for. The second major part is one of the major initiatives that I think it's certainly nothing new, but we take a very hard look at how we spend our infrastructure, state of good repair dollars, and we try wherever possible to put the money into preservation. It's a challenge because sometimes things reach their life cycle end and they do need to be rehabilitated. And the difference between preservation, rehabilitation, and replacement is basically a lot of money. And preservation allows us to extend that life cycle beyond that, which at a lower cost than if we were just to let it fail. We have been very successful in recent years with the interstate system, putting in money on preservation, which would allow us to produce a lot of lane miles preserved every year, extending that life cycle. In the coming years, we do have some more expensive projects, and for the interstate system, that really means that we are not only doing pavement, we're adapting to new safety standards for our guardrail systems. In some cases, we're adapting our drainage systems to design criteria for storm events that are more current than when they were originally built, or just dealing with other infrastructure, non-pavement infrastructure that has reached its useful life. So it's all state of good repair work. The net effect is more lane mile cost for that project to go out, and then downstream, less lane miles paved per year. So long story short, percent good, we're going to try to keep that number where it is. Percent poor is a little bit different, and I will talk about this when we get to bridge. The target setting exercise is for us to do. So the DOT in working with the regions will set these targets. The federal government did set minimum condition thresholds when they rolled out these measures. They are present on the interstate side and on the bridge side. For interstates, the minimum condition threshold is basically that no state should have over 5% poor. When we started our first period, we said essentially, okay, well, we don't want to get to 5, so let's set it for 4. A little bit of experience under our belt. Well, it turns out that our interstate system has next to no poor, and we are setting a more aggressive target to keep us well below that 5% minimum condition threshold. The effect of going above a minimum condition threshold will be described in a little bit, but essentially what it does is it removes some of the freedom of how we use federal aid. It effectively will say that if we surpass that minimum condition threshold, then in those cases, we might have to put a minimum amount of money into that asset class. Moving on to non-interstate NHS. I'll be quick here. Similar story. Again, we're fairly anticipating that there won't be a steep improvement or much of a decline in either the good or the poor of the non-interstate NHS. The major point with the non-interstate NHS is these these roadways vary quite a bit. This could be a Route 3 on the South Shore where it's limited access, behaves quite like an interstate in many sense because it's controlled access and there's interchanges, or it could be a road that's in a downtown that functions much like a complete street. When we go to repair a road like that, or a town goes to repair a road like that, it's vastly different endeavor than it would be to pave Route 3 in Plymouth, for example. We would be potentially looking at some changes to the cross section, looking at accommodations for bicycle and pedestrians, and it's a much different project for us. However, these roadways are measured the same way from the perspective of the federal performance management system. And with the full adoption of our policies for multimodal accommodations, we do see these projects on non-nurse and NHS often costing much more than they would have in the past. So it's another reason, kind of similar to the interstate side, where we hope to basically keep the system as it is. Now on to bridges. Again, here's just the look across the state. As opposed to the roadway system, the majority of NHS bridges are owned by us, being MassDOT. And I think this is my last slide, so I will give you the pitch on the bridge program. We certainly have a big focus on bridges in Massachusetts. The average age of our inventory is 16 years older than the national inventory. And that's really a function, I think, most specifically of when the actual interstates and the national highway system roadways of today, or the systems built out then, we were a little bit ahead of many states. That, coupled with the environmental factors of what usually has been a pretty considerable winter, and the de-icing salts, et cetera, that come along with operating the system in those sorts of circumstances, have certainly created a pretty significant backlog of repair for us on the bridge side. And within these measures, the backlog can most readily be identified by that percentage of poor. So the percent poor. Now, previously I'd mentioned that minimum condition threshold for interstate. On the bridge side, it's essentially that no state should have over 10% poor. So we're at 12%, and we have been above that threshold for some time, though made quite a bit of progress. Over the last 5 years, we've come down from 17% to 12%. So we're certainly headed in the right direction. The bipartisan infrastructure law, as well as the 2021 Massachusetts Transportation Bond Bill, provided the DOT and the Commonwealth with additional funds to address this bridge need within the state. And as I mentioned, the age nationwide comparison, we have the fourth largest percentage of backlog on the national highway system, as I previously described, being poor bridges. And overall, so all the bridges, there's bridges in Nantucket, we have 16th worst in that same criteria. So there's certainly the need to do something here, and this is very much continuing the work that was started with the accelerated bridge program. And effectively, we are driving down that age of the inventory so that we have a sustainable system that can be maintained. To get to that point, that number, that 12%, has to come down. These funds that came through with the state bond bill and now the bipartisan infrastructure law are making a very substantial down payment towards achieving that. To get projects out the door, I'll go back to essentially that discussion on preservation. There really are two types of investment we make for bridges. There's the preservation investment that is meant to keep it, kind of freeze the clock on the bridge life cycle, keep it where it is. And then there are the rehabilitation and replacement. So that's a much more in-depth project that is, it often requires traffic rerouting and real consideration for what the future bridge should look like. It's a much different endeavor. Preservation projects get out quick. The capital projects of rehabilitation and replacement take a little bit longer. Where I'm getting to on this is you can see that our targets are fairly flat out through 2025. The first year that we have been able to actually invest the BIL, bipartisan infrastructure law funding, was 2023. Those projects are preservation projects that are on the street now and will be continue to be led to the bidding community over the next 6 months, well into the next federal fiscal year. Those projects will do one thing. They will keep things where they are until these replacement and rehab projects start to be advertised, start to get to construction, start to have their effects, which will be beyond 25. The first funded projects will be advertised next federal fiscal year. So figure about a 2 to 3 to 4 year construction period of time. Those effects will be seen beyond calendar year 25, and we will be looking to revise those targets in the next full performance period to reflect that investment. So that was a lot of information, but I'm happy to take on any questions or comments on anything I just discussed.
Thank you, Jack. I don't know if either you or Raisa can tell us specifically, you mentioned that there are bridges on Nantucket. Are there any that you're looking at for projects? Are there any that you have concerns about that we should be aware of?
I would be hard pressed to, well, I can provide you a detailed report on that. I didn't come prepared with that information today.
Okay, if you can follow up, that would probably be useful.
Yep.
Thank you.
And just to be clear, those bridges would be outside of the performance that we're discussing here because they're non-NHS, but important nonetheless, and certainly happy to get some.
Okay. I'm not sure if I misunderstood then. I did understand when you said there are no federal highway miles on Nantucket. But I thought you were saying that there were bridges on Nantucket that would be part of this measurement.
Not part of this measurement, but part of the bridge program as a whole.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Questions from commissioners? All right, if there are none, Raisa, I guess you're picking up with the other two measures?
Yes. Hello, everyone. So my name is Raisa Kwame from MassDOT's Office of Transportation Planning, and today I'll be presenting on the PM1 and PM3 performance measures. So all state DOTs are required to develop and endorse these performance measures per federal regulation. And I'll just share my screen for that. So per Federal Highway Administration guidance, the calendar year 2023 target setting process began in April 2022 with a trend line projection based on the most recent available data. Due to higher rates of speeding caused by decreased vehicle miles traveled amid pandemic shutdowns in 2020 and the lingering impacts in 2021, 2020 and 2021 fatalities increased relative to previous years. Fatalities are expected to decrease based on MassDOT efforts in the areas of speed management and safe systems, among other safety strategies. As always, MassDOT's overarching goal is 0 deaths, and this goal will be pursued by implementing strategic highway safety plan strategies. The COVID-19 pandemic greatly impacted VMT, causing fatality rates to spike in 2020 with significant lower VMT and slightly higher fatalities, along with lingering impacts in 2021. The 2023 projection is now 0.59 fatalities per 100 million VMT. So that's the 5-year average of 2019 to 2023. The long-term goal is towards 0 deaths. So the long-term fatality rate is 0 fatalities per 100 million VMT. Due to the higher rates of speeding caused by decreased VMT amid pandemic shutdowns in 2020 and the lingering impacts in 2021, 2020 and 2021, serious injuries increased relative to previous years. Therefore, MassDOT developed targets by projecting the 2022 annual serious injuries to be equal to the lowest year in recent history and the 2023 annual serious injuries to continue downward at a roughly 10% annual decrease, which reflects the average decreases in the years in which the state experienced reductions in serious traffic injuries. This approach resulted in a 5-year average number of serious injuries dropping from 2,626 to 2,569, a reduction of 1.99%. Similar to the fatality rate, serious injury rates were greatly impacted due to COVID. Following the methods above, or just mentioned, the projection is now 4.25 serious injuries per 100 million VMT, down from 4.30 serious injuries per 100 million VMT, a reduction of 1.57%. The long-term goal is towards 0 deaths and serious injuries, so the long-term serious injury rate target is 0 serious injuries per 100 million VMT. The fluctuation in the total number of non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries made tracking the trend in this area difficult. Therefore, non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries for 2022 were said to be equal to 3% higher than our recent lowest year, and 2023 were said to be 3% lower than the recent lowest year. This results in a 5-year average of non-motorist fatalities and serious injuries going from 467 to 437, a reduction of 6.86%. So that was PM1. Now I'll present PM3. So the specific measures included under PM3 are reliability, congestion, and emissions reduction. Reliability includes travel time reliability on both the interstate highway system and non-interstate roads, as well as truck travel time reliability to evaluate the efficiency of freight movement. Congestion includes 2 measures: non-SOV travel and peak hour excessive delay within the whole urbanized area. Emissions reductions is a measure that captures reducing emissions specifically from CMAQ funded projects. Our presentation today and the information that is relevant to Nantucket is that we will be focusing on the non-congestion measures. So travel time reliability on interstates and non-interstates, truck travel time reliability, and emissions reductions. The first measure I'll be presenting is level of travel time reliability, which refers to the percentage of miles on roadways that are considered reliable. It's important to note that reliability in this context does not necessarily mean uncongested. It is more a measure related to the predictability of travel. So if a roadway is consistently congested, it would be considered reliable under this measure. Whereas if a roadway is perfectly clear one day and considered reliable under this measure, highly congested the next, leading to unpredictable travel times, it would be considered unreliable for this purpose. With regard to the reporting timeline, MassDOT submitted statewide reliability targets to the Federal Highway Administration on December 16, 2022, and all MPOs are required to either adopt these targets or establish their own within 6 months of this date. We are asking for the board to review these targets now so that the updated targets can be endorsed and included within the Regional Transportation Improvement Program and Regional Transportation Plan, both of which need to be endorsed over the next few months. This slide has more detail on how to calculate the level of travel time reliability. I won't go over this in too much depth, but the process involves measuring different travel times percentiles on different roadway segments at different times of the day, comparing these travel times to see how much variation there is, and then aggregating the percentage of roadway miles considered reliable based on these calculations. Since the measure is reported as a percentage of all roadway miles considered reliable statewide, we consider an increasing percentage moving in the right direction for this measure. The next measure in the reliability category is truck travel time reliability, which measures the amount of time it takes for trucks to drive the length of a road segment. The reporting timeline is the same for this one. MassDOT submitted its targets on December 16th. CTTR is calculated in a somewhat similar way to the level of travel time reliability, but is reported as an index instead of a percentage. Different percentiles of travel times within a segment are compared to assess how much variation there is and the index is developed. Travel time reliability is reported at both the interstate and non-interstate level. The data for interstates is shown on this slide. The first year we started to collect data on this measure was in 2017, and as you can see, the trend between 2017 and 2019 the trend was heading in the wrong direction, with roadways becoming less reliable during that period. In 2020, as a result of significantly fewer vehicles on the road, as a result of the COVID pandemic, travel time reliability shot up to 94.4% that year. In 2021, reliability went down slightly, but remained much higher than pre-pandemic levels. Since these were very atypical years with extenuating circumstances, they were disregarded for the purposes of target setting. Instead, MassDOT chose to develop 2- and 4-year targets that represented improved reliability over pre-pandemic levels while accounting for external factors, such as continued work from home trends and other MassDOT initiatives that aim to improve travel time reliability. In 2024, the 2024 target of 74% represents a 5% increase over 2019 levels. The 2026 target of 76% represents an even greater increase to reflect MassDOT's goal of improving reliability. Setting the non-interstate travel time reliability targets involved both aiming for improving over the prior target years while also assessing the accuracy of the current trend line. The trend line for non-interstate travel time reliability showed small improvements prior to the pandemic, increasing from 80.1% in 2017 to 82.8% in 2019. As with other reliability data, non-interstate reliability was high in 2020 and 2021 due to lower VMT. At the time these targets were set in the fall of 2022, the year-to-date 2022 figure showed 89%, which was an improvement over the 2021 figure of 87.9%. However, MassDOT felt that the year-to-date 2022 figure at the time of target setting may have been a little too optimistic, since non-interstate reliability can be particularly unpredictable. As such, a conservative approach was used to set targets that were slightly lower than the trend line, but were still higher than the prior target of 80%. This was the logic behind the 2-year target of 85% and the 4-year target of 87%. This slide shows the trend line for truck travel time reliability, or TTTR. Unlike the previous 2 reliability metrics, which show the percentage of road miles that are reliable, TTTR is shown just as an index, comparing 95th percentile travel time just of trucks carrying freight to the 50th percentile travel time of trucks. Since a lower number indicates less variability in travel time, the direction we want the trend line for this measure to go is down. With regard to the trend line, you can see that there was a bit of variation prior to the pandemic between 2017 and 2019, with some improvements in TTTR between 2018 and 2019. However, since the pandemic, 2021 and 2022 data show that TTTR is worsening slightly, going up to 1.61 in 2021 and 1.64 in 2022. As such, to set targets in this area, MassDOT sought to show improvements over the prior target of 1.85 and set a 2024 target of 1.80 and a 2026 target of 1.75. These targets still aim to improve upon the last target set while also being achievable given the current trend line. So thank you for listening to the PM1, PM2, PM3 presentations, and we request a vote for endorsement for these targets.
Thank you, Raisa, and thank you, Jack. Any comments or questions from commissioners? Andrew, is it appropriate for us to take a motion to vote to endorse these?
Yes, please, Madam Chair.
Anyone like to make that motion? Raisa, do you have a specific text that you need in that motion, or is it simply a motion to endorse P1, P2, and P3 performance measures?
Yes, that is correct. It is that. Yes, it's correct.
Make that motion, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Nat. Do we have a
P1.
second?
Second.
The motion.
Thank you, Wendy. Bert, do you have a question before we vote?
I was just making a second.
Okay, Wendy beat you to it. But good to see you here. Roll call vote, Seth Engelborg.
Aye.
I think Don Holgate dropped off the meeting. So Wendy Hudson,
Aye.
Dave Iverson,
Aye.
Bert Johnson,
Aye.
Matt Lowell,
Aye.
Barry Rector,
Aye.
Joe Topham,
Aye.
and Mary Longacre, aye. Thank you for that. Next item on our agenda is the TIP readiness days results and scenarios. Race, is that you?
Yes, I will be presenting those. Sorry, I'm just gonna try to present the.
We do see your screen, so that part's
Okay,
working.
okay.
All right,
So
looks-
we had the readiness days process this year, where MassDOT reviews all the projects for the different regions, and I will be presenting on the different scenarios and results of readiness days for Nantucket. So the fiscal year STIP program targets for Nantucket are as follows. So there's in fiscal year 2024, we have $668,939. For fiscal year 2025, we have $657,575. For fiscal year 2026, we have $641,487. And for fiscal year 2027, we have $794,307. And for fiscal year 2028, we have $809,258. It's $58.
Mhm.
So these are the different projects that are part of the Nantucket priority of projects. So the first is the Tom Never Side Path, which the MPO recommended a 2027 project fiscal year. The Sparks Williams Pleasant Non-Motorist Improvements Project with a MPO recommended year of 2028. The Waiwinet Side Path, which I have more information regarding this project, is in the process of receiving a FLAP grant because an application was sent. So our previous information indicated that FHWA is estimating that 2.2 million will be available for Massachusetts regions and communities through FLAP. Please note that the final number will be determined and presented and announced soon. And regular FLAP project decision committee meetings have been occurring. I think there was one on January 26th, and there was actually one today. The next project is the Orange Street Non-Motorist Improvement Project with a 2028 fiscal year. And the next project, which has a project number and more information than the others, is the Milestone Road and Pulpus Path project. Milestone Road and Pulpus Road project with a 2024 recommended year. So this was a new development from the project readiness days, that this project with a proposed programmed amount of $1,200,000 would be ready for 2024 delivery. So this project was highlighted by the safety office to spend down HSIP allocation. And so there should be, based on the recommendations from the project readiness, there should be more discussion as to how this will be implemented. I have also more information regarding this project. So the Milestone Road is state highway. The cost of the project expanded in part due to the work required at the intersection to better accommodate bikes and pedestrians. And it is likely that the construction of for this project will occur over 2 tip years. So I have a scenario 1 for the Milestone and Pulpus Road project. So these are the 3 scenarios for fiscal year 2024. So the first scenario could be that the regional target is used for this project. However, the regional target does not suffice to cover the entire cost of the project. And there would be a $531,061 gap in funding. The second scenario would be that no regional target is used for the project, and this project is entirely covered by a statewide HSIP funding. And the third scenario would be a combination of both, which would mean that some regional target would be used and some HSIP funding would be used to cover the cost of the project. And currently, MassDOT is seeking to get the information from the NPDC and in terms of the interest in using regional target at all to fund Milestone and Pulpus Road. And the decision will inform statewide programming. And so the discussion would be on discussing the appropriate split needed if there is, if the NPDC and the board wants to use regional target and HSIP funds. The scenario 2 would, the scenario for fiscal year 2025 is the Waiwinet side path, which the project costs, so that would be used for the regional target for that year is $657,575. So that would, the Waiwinet side path could be programmed that year. And the Waiwinet side path could be programmed in fiscal year 2026 as well. So the FLAP grant is in the process of being secured for the Waiwinet side path. And the PDC project decision committee is meeting this week to finalize awards. More information on the award is anticipated in the next few weeks. And for fiscal year 2027, the project that would be programmed based on the information that we have is the Tom Nevers side path. And finally, in fiscal year 2028, the Sparks, Williams, and Pleasant non-motorist improvements project and the Orange Street non-motorist improvement projects would be programmed for those years. So thank you for listening, and that's the information I have, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Mary was having technical difficulties. She texted me, so I don't know if you want to jump in, Barry. She's just rebooting her computer.
Yeah, sure. So any questions from the commissioners? No. All right. Is there any?
I just want to one thing, just it's a thank you to everyone involved with that side path of Milestone, making that happen. That was Patrick, Raisha, Andrew. I mean, that was quite a sort of an arrangement to get that all plugged in. So I just want to thank them all for that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Now, we appreciate the collaboration that the state offers with these programs that sometimes would never get off the ground or would stall for years with funding sources. So it's just a great collaborative effort, and it really is appreciated. Lisa, do you need anything else, or are we good here, or?
Yeah, I think we're good. Yep, thank you.
All right, so Mike, you looking forward to working with Mike Byrne? You didn't know Mike, did you? No. You're going to love Mike because he's going to be right up to speed on things at this point. So when you guys are working together, they'll be able to just go, boom, I know what that is, and let's talk about it. So, all right, thank you both. Appreciate it. I don't have the agenda in front of me here at this point, Megan. I'm sorry. And there's Mary.
It's okay, Mary's back.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're ready to pick up on the next point.
Yeah, thank you, Barry, for carrying us through. And I
No.
apologize. I had to reboot
It
my.
happens.
Yeah. Are there any other items under the Mass DOT updates?
We do not currently have any other items. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Raisa. So next item on our agenda is the Transportation Program Manager. We have a couple of things that we need to do here. Andrew, you'll walk us through those?
Certainly, thank you, Madam Chair. So the first item on the agenda is the authorization of contract terms. And as Barry has stated a couple times, I guess in advance of the surprise, we have Mr. Mike Burns returning to the commission. Those terms were negotiated in their final form by the commission in executive session. So I would ask that there be a vote to authorize the contract terms as discussed earlier.
I'll make a motion to approve that.
Thank you, Bert.
Second.
Do we have a second? Second from, I'm sorry, I missed that.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Barry.
Yeah.
Any further discussion? Andrew, did you need any specific language or just simply what we're going ahead with here?
Just what we're going ahead with for this first item, yes.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, roll call vote. Seth Engelbart,
Aye.
Don Holgate, I think is left. Wendy Hudson,
Aye.
Dave Iverson,
Aye.
Bert Johnson,
Aye.
Matt Lowell,
Aye.
Harry Rector,
Aye.
Joe Topham,
Aye.
and Mary Longacre, aye. Dave, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just quickly wanted to thank staff and everyone that made this happen. That made Mike come back. He was sorely missed, and Patrick was wonderful, don't get me wrong, but here we have a man who has a lot of experience with Nantucket, who did a very good job before he left. And we should, and the island as a whole should celebrate his return. So that's really what I say. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Yeah.
Okay, Andrew, next.
Yep. So, Madam Chair, the next item, as we talked about before, the bylaw of the NPNEDC authorizes me as the director to appoint staff, and Mr. Burns was provided with an offer letter earlier today. So under the terms of our bylaws, you have the ability to either consent to my offer of employment, or you can adopt a resolution of disapproval. So I would ask you, in the spirit of what Dave just said, to make a motion to consent to that offer, please.
Do we have some? I'm sorry, I missed it.
I'll make that motion.
Dave, thank you. And a second?
Okay.
Thank you, Bert. Roll call vote. Seth Engelbart,
Aye.
Wendy Hudson,
Aye.
Dave Iverson,
Aye.
Bert Johnson,
Aye.
Matt Lowell,
Aye.
Harry Rector,
Gladly, aye.
Joe Topham,
Aye.
and Mary Longacre with thanks. Aye.
Yeah.
Andrew?
Yep. And finally, Madam Chair, so the
Thank you.
employment letter to Mr. Burns, which he has accepted, was contingent upon the signature of both parties of the final contract. So as we let in here, we didn't know what those final conditions were. So now that you've finished your deliberation, we would ask that a motion to authorize you representing the full commission be authorized to sign the contract.
I'll make that motion to authorize you to sign the contract.
Thank you, Bert. Do you have a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you, Matt. Roll call vote. Seth Engelbart,
Aye.
Wendy Hudson,
Aye.
Dave Iverson,
Aye.
Bert Johnson,
Aye.
Matt Lowell,
Aye.
Harry Rector,
Aye.
Joe Topham,
Aye.
and Mary Longacre, aye. Thank you, Andrew. Is there, we have grant updates under Transportation Program Manager as well. Unless there's anything else you want to say about the Transportation Program Manager position being filled by Mike Burns.
Sure, I would just like to comment a little bit on that. I really thank the board members for their full support for Mr. Burns. I know I don't know if he's out watching the proceedings here, but I want to thank him as well for making an effort to work under a fairly tight deadline. You all should know that he and Patrick were regularly in touch with each other. I think they both helped each other during Patrick's sort of learning curve here. And, once it was known that, Patrick was moving on, I think there was some sharing of information, which I think was great. I think this speaks well too of retaining our long-term employees and attracting them back. This is our second employee that left and has come back, so I take that as a high praise about our office and how we function. And I think it's important for, again, with the level of projects, what you just heard from Mass Highway, there's the grant updates that at least we're going to talk about. There's at least, I believe there's a certain false narrative running around about, the NPDC doesn't secure grants. We have at least 4 active grants in the Transportation Department alone that we're under the gun here to manage. And that's why, Mike's sort of willingness to step up here and return is so important, especially with the recent absence of the DPW director. Again, and that's a critical partner that has set us back. So also, I can't miss the opportunity to remind you that the 2-year vacancy of that position, was seen as a critical issue for both the town and for me personally and the NPDC to close that gap. And again, I think if you need any example of the specialized knowledge for this job, you just need to recall what you just heard during the presentation by our Mass DOT friends. So anyway, I just really wanted to underscore that, and I'm thankful for his return. So
Thank you, Andrew. Bert?
Yeah, when will Michael be coming back?
March 1st is his official start date.
One more time?
March 1st.
March 1st?
Nat?
Yes, thank you, Mary. I just wanted to say, add a couple things with what Andrew said. I think, to roll back a couple decades, really. We had Beth Giannini before Mike. And when Mike was here, he was here so long, he was just sort of one of us, just lived here, and no one ever really paid much attention to, how complicated that position is. The town's had some struggles with procurement stuff and some of these more complicated positions over the last few years. And this one here, when he left February 2020, just before COVID, and that's another issue that is huge in this whole thing. I don't think anybody really anticipated how difficult it would be to replace him. Not just to replace him, but it's not him, it's what he has to do. This stuff with the state and Fed stuff is it's like brain surgery, and it's not that easy. It might be easier to find Dr. Kilcoyne than to find another person to replace Mike if we didn't have him. So, keep that in mind. It wasn't easy. And so he, as Barry alluded earlier, he's going to hit the ground running. That's a fact. I mean, he already knows everything about the island, all the things you're not supposed to say, because it's not what people want to hear. Anything mentioning off-island type solutions and all those kind of things. And I had a nice email exchange with Patrick. I want to, tell you all. I tell you, he loved it here. He loved us all. He really enjoyed things. He appreciates everything that happens. But, he has a real life somewhere else. And that's the problem, is to get someone to come here now. It isn't like 5 years ago, and certainly not 20 years ago. So we're kind of lucky in a way. So I just wanted to say that, just to bring up those, sort of historical ways of looking at this position. We sort of got spoiled, not realizing how complicated this really is to do.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
I'm guessing that you're going to tell us that Mike is on the participant list, and maybe he would like to say hello.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to say. So let me bring him over.
Oh, Mike, I hope you have video. There we are.
Hi, everybody. I'm so glad I didn't start shedding tears during Nat and what everybody else was saying. This is it's not often you hear the kind words, and I'm sure that'll end pretty soon.
How can you say that, Mike?
So thank you all for having me back. Like I said, Andrew and Leslie were fantastic in talking this through, and this was an extremely accelerated timeline that everybody was on. A lot of it was my own personal reasons. I left an incredible situation in Houston, working for the 4th largest region in the entire country, and did well. I did miss it back up here. It's there is that thing about Nantucket that always brings you back, something about sand in your shoes or something like this. But I am back in the area. I did get a lot of the movers were in my new apartment this morning. I'm exhausted physically and mentally, and looking forward to next week and getting started once everything gets settled away. I did talk a lot with Patrick. Patrick was an incredible employee, and he did great work. I watched a lot of the stuff that he did. But like was mentioned, life happens. So I'm glad that the opportunity was there for me to come back, and I'm glad that everyone's been so welcoming and hospitable. And like I said, it's I don't really need to get to know a lot of y'all. I've known you for a couple of decades, so good to be working with you again. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I guess if you any of the board when you left, it must have worked.
Yeah. I just one last thing. I know one of the more critical things that needs to be updated is the regional transportation plan. So I just finished writing the regional transportation plan for the 4th largest region in the entire country. I'll now come and write the regional transportation plan for one of the smallest regions in the entire country. I don't think that's ever been done anywhere. So thank you for the opportunity to have bragging rights.
Thank you, Mike. Barry?
Yeah, Michael, I'm so glad you accepted, and kudos to staff and kudos to this commission. When you see that you've got the right personnel with the right ideas and spirit of cooperation and vision to move ahead, you don't lose that in any way, shape, or form. So I'm just thrilled personally to have you back and look forward to working with you again, as I'm sure most of us do here. In my book, if we hadn't brought you back, it just, well, I'll leave it at that. I'm not going to belabor the point, but I think you get the drift.
Thank you, Barry.
Welcome back, Mike.
Thank you, Bert.
All right. Well, Mike, thanks for joining us. You're not yet on the clock, so you don't have to stick around any longer, but of course you're welcome to.
I thought you were going to ask me some questions about performance measures.
Yeah. And Andrew, I guess getting back to grant updates, is there anything you wanted to add there? I know you've mentioned them already.
Yeah, I think we've sort of touched on several of them in the earlier presentation. I think one that I'm not sure that you all know about, but this was one that Patrick had put together, which was the safety plan among the 3 regions. So Mike, there's another one that you can put in your to-do list. It's a very interesting grant to make us more competitive. So it's it's again a collaboration with the other 2 rural RPAs, Franklin County, involving our former employee Beth Giannini and the Vineyard. So we're very pleased to get that. It's get the exact amount, but it is in the neighborhood of $500,000 as well. So again, there's at least $1 million in these grants, and grants are wonderful. I love them. We all love them, but I need help. And so again, with Mike returning, that's wonderful. And hopefully we'll get some additional help on the town side with some of this too, because it's this all is a lot of work. So anyway, we'll all be busy.
Thank you, Andrew. All right, moving on to the next item on the agenda, the update on articles of planning concern with the FinCom recommendations. Is it Megan taking us through that, or Leslie, or I'm not sure who?
I think if Megan could put the screen, could you maybe share the screen?
Bear with me just a moment.
So we had previously provided recommendations to FinCom, and so now we're seeing the results that they have had for their recommendations.
So
I think that's all of them on the screen. That's great, Megan.
Yes.
So this is just a follow-up to let you know. I mean, I think that the FinCom has voted fairly consistently with our recommendations. I'd recommend that the commission members review the FinCom meeting, especially on Article 83 and Article 36, I think would be good meetings. I know some of you have already reviewed that, but I think that for people to understand some of the debate going on in those particular articles. The lighting article, I know, was something that was still in flux, and I did get a late email about, I think, a possible motion on that, which is to adopt some portion of it. I think there's still some open-ended questions on the enforcement part of that, but that meeting is happening at the same time as our meeting. So again.
And Andrew, do we need to have anybody representing us for Articles 11 and 14 that are on the FinCom's agenda? They're not yet determined what their recommendation is.
Don't know. I mean, we submitted our recommendations to them, so I don't know the results of their meeting today, but we will update this chart and then send it out once we get that, once we learn of what their actions were today.
Great. All right, any questions or comments before we move on? All right, next item on the agenda, the open space and recreation plan, update on that. Is that Andrew?
Megan, I'm going to ask you to update the commissioners on that, since I unfortunately couldn't sit in on that meeting.
Sure. So I had a meeting with our Weston and Sampson representative, Brandon, earlier this week, just to go over the status of their edits. As you may recall, the plan was circulated to the commission and various members in the community, stakeholders in the community, and staff members for input. So they're working to incorporate those comments and suggestions that they've received thus far. They also had some comments that needed some follow-up with Andrew and I from the state. So we're working on getting them the information that they need on that, to have that incorporated into the plan. They assured me they would have it ready to disperse by March 1st. So we will need to have it approved at the NP and EDC level, at the planning board level, and then the public hearing will actually take place through the select board, to approve the plan in that regard. So this will be on your March agenda, both for the NP and EDC and for those of you that also serve on the planning board. It will be on that agenda as well. It will also be posted publicly, and then the select board would follow through with their advertising protocols for the public hearing. So hopefully it'll start moving forward at a faster pace next month. And that is where we're at with the open space plan.
Thank you, Megan. Good to see that moving. Next, any questions on the open space plan before we move forward? All right, seeing none. Next item is the area plans, progress update, and procedures. So as we have been working on the open space and recreation plan, there has not been time for heavy focus on the area plans, but we are looking forward to returning to those. We currently have 3 groups who are developing area plans, an update from Nantucket, a new plan from Monomoy, and a new plan from the town area. We have 2 other groups who have expressed an interest in plans, and the groups are moving at different paces, I guess is the best way to put it. And so we thought that having a little bit more well-established procedure and some guidelines would be helpful for all groups now and in the future. Andrew, do you want to say anything more about those?
No, I think not this time, but I may chime in as if there's further discussion about them.
I'll say I have reached out to Nantucket requesting that they let us know how they're doing. Monomoy has let us know how they're doing, and the Town Area Association is planning to come in March to our meeting and let us know how they're doing. But I can say, being on that committee, that we have a survey out right now. So we're pulling the responses in, and we'll see what we get from that. Any comments or questions on area plans? Right. Next item on our agenda is MARPA updates. Who's presenting that?
So I can give just a few updates on that. We had our monthly meeting last week for MARPA. Some of those updates included legislative updates. The key talking point there was what's happening with open meeting and Zoom meetings and hybrid meetings, and how is that all moving forward, which they don't have an answer for as of yet. So hopefully we'll have resolution to that before next month, but as of right now, things are still up in the air. We'll be attending the DLTA Day at the State House next month. I believe that's on March the 29th. Another update is MARPA's redesigning their website, trying to interact with all of the RPAs. So we'll be working with them to provide them relevant information for Nantucket. And those were kind of the highlights of that meeting.
Thank you, Megan. Any questions or comments? If there are none, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is discussion of the NP and EDC mission. We were provided in the packet with copies of the mission statements from the other Massachusetts regional planning authorities. Thank you very much, Barry, for putting those together and sending them out. And so what we want to do is discuss changes to our mission. Megan, if you have it handy, maybe you want to put our mission up on the screen, whether inspired by the other organizations or for our own situation here on Nantucket. If people have ideas for what they would like to see, this would be the time to start talking about that. I don't want to be the one to go first. Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can tell you what I definitely don't want to see is one of these longer, drawn out statements like Middlesex or Pioneer Valley. I think that's not helpful. I also saw that in a lot of the mission statements, that have been listed out here in this guide for us, there are words that keep getting used that don't mean anything. So let's make sure that we have a straightforward mission that directly stating what we're trying to do. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Seth.
Mm.
Additional thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with what Seth said about words that don't mean anything. That's for sure. There's a lot of that nowadays, and I definitely think we should keep it to what we really are. And I also, that's the word I'm looking for. Just to what we're trying to change, we need to get this right. And the regional planning agency with one town, and talking what we did last meeting about Barnstable, I think is important as well. I still really believe that that is something that we need to recognize at this level because of our relationship over there and the amount of things that are happening.
Mm-hmm.
We're on their agenda actually next week for something really important, the steamship. So it's good. It's important to recognize that going forward. We were a long way away from Hyannis when the MPNEDC was created.
Mm.
So
Thank you, Nat. Wendy?
I'm having trouble like making sure I'm tracking everything. I like the idea of making sure we say balance in there, because we're not only to protect something and we're not only to promote something, and I feel like the idea of creating the balance is important. And I was just digging around to see if I could see it in there, but I don't. Forgive me if I'm repeating something that's already existing.
Mm.
Thank you, Wendy. Other thoughts? Barry?
Yeah, when I understand how our language developed and why it was put in there at the time, because it was a brand new concept, been only running for a while out there, and Nantucket was still in its infancy of growing, so you wanted to give it as much latitude as possible, but the problem I have when I look at it nowadays, and with some of these other regional transportation plans as well, is they're incredibly vague and they're incredibly open-ended in terms of what they're trying to achieve. And so we need to steer clear of that kind of language. I mean, the other thing too is when I read through our plan nowadays, it makes us look like the master of all that's out there. Boy, that is so far from the truth. I mean, you've got a lot of local talent here, and our job should not be to eclipse them in any way, shape, or form. I mean, when I hate to say it, when we're doing a comprehensive plan, that was when we became master of all, and I'm so glad with the direction that took. That needed to not take place because it was wrong on so many levels. So I think it's time for us to update our language. I mean, I looked through a few of these. Merrimack had some incredibly good language, because nowadays we really need to articulate on the fact that we are a regional planning agency, and how do we begin to integrate with the rest of the state on that level. Not to try to supplant the things that are happening here locally, like our local economy, but how does it dovetail in on a much larger basis, on a regional basis for dealing with those things. So I'd urge the commissioners, whatever they do as well too, and I know Andrew and I have had long talks about it, is it's so imperative to steer away from that language that, just says the social well-being, for instance. Want to describe that to me, anyone? And how we're supposed to, how is that supposed to be determined and netted out? So choose wisely, and I'll certainly have my thoughts as we begin to hone in on the process here. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. And that's actually a good lead into some of the things that I wanted to say. I like the specificity of the Central Massachusetts, where they listed some very well-defined tasks. I noticed that Middlesex and Pioneer Valley were the exact same mission statement, and I thought that was not a good way to go. I saw words like advocate, foster cooperative effort in resolving common regional problems in Merrimack Valley. A lot of the language here says regional collaboration because they represent regions with different constituencies. And we don't, but I think regional collaboration for us is important with Martha's Vineyard and Cape Cod, because what I see in our future are a lot of bigger issues, issues that are not specific to Nantucket, or issues that require the cooperation of the Cape, or perhaps the inspiration of what might have already been done at Martha's Vineyard, or vice versa with the two islands. And those are opportunities that I think we should be thinking about. And also the MOU should be mentioned. I think one of these has, Martha's Vineyard has to assist our region's towns with planning expertise. That should probably be listed in our mission statement. That's a very big part of what we do. So that was something that I thought was important as well. Seth, we'll go to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The first is just a brief thing. I think there was actually potentially a copy paste error with the Middlesex mission. I don't think that's actually their mission. I think that Pioneer Valley Planning Commission was pasted twice, but we can figure out what Middlesex's mission is on their website. And then, Madam Chair, if you allow me a small amount of latitude, I'd appreciate it. Or if not, you can tell me to just stop at any time. So I think that in addition to figuring out how we refine our mission, what we also need to do is to set a vision. So we obviously have a history. We have, legislation that allowed for our commission to be created. But lots of organizations, they only focus on the what. The mission is the what are we doing? And then they focus on the how, that's the objectives and the plans, but they never focus on the why, and that's the vision. And a lot of these organizations become very, very skilled at doing something, but they have no idea why they're doing that something. So I think part of this, part of what we're having here at the NPNEDC is an identity crisis. And before we delve too deep into what actually are we doing, we do need to step back a little bit and discuss the why as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. Other comments or questions? Barry?
I'm just going to say one other thing too. I'm going to state the obvious, which is we are a regional planning agency of one town. That's it. And you always have to remember what some of these other regional planning agencies are trying to do is coordinate a lot of different types of projects like infrastructure and stuff to service a lot of different towns that fall under their umbrella. But it's been a while. I will tell you, going to a Markman meeting was one of the lightning experiences that I ever had. I'm really proud of our regional planning agency and the people involved with it at this point. I'll be very blunt with you. When I went to a few MARPA meetings, some of them were living in ivory towers. And this is why the towns and the regional planning agencies did not play well with each other. So it's important to keep that in mind is, who are we as well, what we service. And as I've always said beforehand, one of the things that I love about us being a regional planning agency, we're not the foster or stepchild of the Cape Cod or Vineyard when it comes time to get funding to be able to do projects here. We enjoy the fact that we've got economic leverage as opposed to getting the hand-me-downs. So keep that in mind as well too when you start going through this. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Andrew, I thought you had your hand up there. It's a little bit off camera, but go ahead,
Oh,
please.
there it is. Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to say first off that I do agree with your comments, Seth. I do think that those long mission statements, I think, are very ineffective. I do like something, and to marry your point about assistance, I mean, I think where like the Berkshire example, for example, talks about leadership and assistance. I think those are good words to include. I do like Old Colony, which talks about technical expertise and the focus on collaboration of regions of, the Cape and Islands, especially, and connections, to the state and federal resources. So I'm glad I hope there's sort of a unity around that sort of brief is better. And I do think that the focus on assisting our existing organizations and the town is really the proper focus for us, not planning for them, which I think is something I've heard, and what some of these other regions actually do, plan for, or come up with plans that may impact the community in the context of what's best for the entire region. So, I like, those shorter ones. And I think, thank you for all the conversation, because I think we're at least in more of a position to start bringing some draft examples at our next meeting. I do agree with Seth's comment about vision as well. And, that might be certainly a component that is either separate, but I do think it's an important part to include in any amendment of the legislation. I think that is a great idea. So.
Thank you, Andrew. I was going to say something similar, that, that the mission and the vision, the conversation about those necessarily overlaps because they're so closely related. And I think we would be well served to have both. It also helped clarify the statements that we're making, that they don't run on too long. So definitely, I think that's an opportunity we should pursue. We've had a couple mentions about the climate action plan. So one of the things that I didn't see in these examples, probably because they were written some time ago, was any focus on on climate action or on environmental protection. And I wasn't sure if that was necessary or appropriate here, but I did want to bring that up. I think we do have the climate action plan, and we do have support for the coastal resilience efforts as part of the planning department's charge right now. Any further thoughts on that? Okay. Any other areas that people have thought of that we haven't mentioned that we might want to think about? Right, Andrew, as you said, I think bringing some draft statements to our next meeting would be the next step. And again, everybody, please do think about, what opportunities for language we want to have, what statements we want to make, whether it's the vision or the mission. And please do send any ideas to Andrew so he can incorporate those. And Andrew, I'm going to say, feel free to give Andrew a call too, if that's easier. Right. Next item on our agenda, other business. The next meeting is Monday, March 20th at 6 p.m. And this is a time change because there is a joint meeting involving the planning board members earlier in the day. So we'll be meeting at 6. We are not anticipating a speaker to help get some of the time back for that meeting. Is there anything else under other business, Andrew, or anyone else? Committee reports?
Oh, Madam Chair.
Seth, and then.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Harbor Plan Update Committee has begun its meetings, which you appointed me the representative to. Due to unfortunate circumstances, my email was left off all communications for that committee. So I wasn't unaware that the meeting happened or was even happening. But I've been since filled in with the minutes and other relevant information, and that process is up and going and expected in the planning phase to take about 1 year, and then we'll move into implementation phase after that.
Thank you, Seth. Anyone else? All right, if there's nothing else, we will adjourn the open session. And is that a twofold motion, Andrew, or is it one motion to adjourn and then to move into executive session?
It's adjourn and move to executive session, not to return.
Okay. Do we have that motion? Bert?
I'll make that motion, Mary.
Thank you. A second.
Second.
Thank you, Nat. Roll call vote. Seth Engelberg,
Aye.
Wendy Hudson,
Aye.
Dave Iverson,
Aye.
Bert Johnson,
Aye.
Nat Lowell,
Aye.
Barry Fisher. Barry, you there? Looks like
Oops.
Barry.
Barry muted.
Joe Topham
Aye.
and Mary Longacre, aye, and we will remain in this Zoom meeting. No, we're not. Sorry, Megan's saying no.
So there's another link. So we will leave the Zoom meeting. I had sent it to you earlier today, but I just resent, so it's at the top of all your email inboxes.
Thank you, Megan.
You're welcome.
We have adjourned, so we're done.
Yep, we're done with this one.
Thank
We're gonna
you.
go sign on to the next.
Thank you.
Thank you.